Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Oh, what an emphatic statement by the New Orleans Saints week one. 47-10. They just blast Carolina. The challenge ratchets up this week as they head to Dallas. Our guy Ross Jackson, LouisianaSports.net, of course, the Locked On Saints podcast. Good enough to join us for a couple minutes. How are you, dude?
Hey, buddy, doing great. How you holding up?
Really good. The game on Sunday, you could have convinced me the Saints were going to win. I thought they would. 47-10, most points ever in an opener. What in the world happened to this team, Ross? I mean, you saw them. You were in California. You watched every training camp practice, the preseason games. Could you have foreseen this at all?
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, look, we expected the Saints to win that game, as you mentioned, but there's a couple things they did that I didn't expect them to do. Scoring 47 points, of course, being one of those. But the other one is just coming out of the gate ready to go right off the bat. I mean, look, stumbling would have made sense for this team pretty early, right? I mean, new offensive system, new offensive play caller, some new pieces in the offensive line, or at least even pieces that moved around on the offensive line. There's a lot of reasons for this team to stumble out of the gate, but they didn't, and they came up with an opening drive touchdown, which they've struggled to do over the course of the past 3 seasons. And then the last thing, they scored 9 straight possessions right out of that game, too. So not only did they come out hot, but they were able to maintain sort of that level of productivity throughout. Now, the defense gave their part in that, giving Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints offense some short fields, but kudos to the Saints offense and new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak for designing a scheme, a game plan with their new offensive system that worked right out of the gate.
Ross, what did they do on Sunday that you didn't see in all of those training camp practices?
Yeah, look, I'm going to be honest. A lot of what they did is what we saw them do. I mean, this is pretty true to what it is that they're building their identity around and what they're doing in terms of their DNA, right? I mean, their usage of, players in multiple different areas, their ability to move guys around. I mean, you think about Taysom Hill that way, who played, I think it was 7 different positions in this game to go neatly with his jersey number. But then you also have, the fact that they came out with more than 33% increase in motion in this individual game, kind of compared to what they did in all of 2023. They used motion over 66% of their plays in this one. And then they took Derek Carr from 14% of play action dropbacks all throughout last season, and then bolstered that all the way up to 40%. So they had him on more than a third of his dropbacks running play action, which is something that he has historically done very well in their, in his career. So honestly, they did a lot of the things that we expected them to do. It's just the efficiency with which they did it, the execution that partnered with it, and it was the fact that they were doing things that were so vastly different from what they were doing in their previous system that I think led to the success that you saw on Sunday.
It was amazing. The question obviously becomes, how do you replicate it or build upon it? We'll get to that in a second, but was there anything on the opposite end of it, Ross? I mean, when you win 48-10 and everything seems to work, was there anything that you look and say, okay, this was awesome, but that's a thing that you're going to have to work on because it didn't hurt you today, but it could moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it might be a little bit of low-hanging fruit here, but I think the penalties, discipline, stuff like that are going to be the bigger things. I know it's week 1, but the New Orleans Saints have been one of the most penalized teams in the NFL over the course of the past few years. And I think that when you walk out of a game to where, it's easy to ride high on 390-plus total offensive yards, 47 points scored without a defensive or special team score, and then turning around and being able to do everything they did over on the offensive side, it's easy to kind of ride out on that on high and go, okay, great, nothing to adjust, nothing to work on, anything like that. But I think you got to look at some of the missed opportunities in terms of there was the pass that Derek Carr threw to Taysom Hill in the end zone that almost actually ended up being a touchdown. But Juwan Johnson had a moment in that very same play where he was wide open over the middle of the field, or it looked like he could have been wide open in the middle of the field. So a missed opportunity there, some missed opportunities in special teams, and then the penalties that I think were big. And when you come into a game to where you put up all those numbers, 9 penalties for 95 yards doesn't end up hurting you, but 9 penalties for 95 yards could absolutely demolish what you're doing in a more tightly contested game or in a game where you're not operating as cleanly otherwise.
Well said. He's on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. Give him a follow. Of course, read his stuff at LouisianaSports.net. Ross, doing a great job leading our coverage over there of the Saints. LouisianaSports.net. Of course, make sure you subscribe to his podcast as well, Locked on Saints. Hey, flip it over to the defensive side. What did you see? What was the biggest standout there?
Yeah, well, I think Alontae Taylor is the biggest standout, becoming the first New Orleans Saints defensive back with 3 sacks in a game. But I'll tell you, one of the other guys that really stood out was Chase Young. The Saints went out and took a little bit of a risk. They rolled the dice a little bit here, signing Chase Young, knowing that he needed a neck procedure, right? Reports are that they knew about it ahead of when they signed, and then he ended up, going through that neck procedure and then getting his way back out onto the field out in California pretty early. Everything that we were told was about how quickly he was working ahead of his progress and how quickly he was ahead of his timeline and all those other things. And then so for him to come into his very first game and immediately have the impact that the New Orleans Saints were looking for when they signed him this offseason, to the tune of 6 pressures, and really leading the way on a couple of those Alontae Taylor sacks as well. Alontae wisely just kind of following behind Chase Young on a couple of those. That's exactly what you want to get from this guy. And then now he moves into a game up against the Dallas Cowboys coming up, which is familiar territory for him, having played in the NFC East before he signed. But I think that those are 2 big standouts. And then I'll just mention real quick, too, the safety play. A lot of question marks around who was going to be the starting safety next to Tyrann Mathieu. They roll with Will Harris, the veteran, to do that. And I thought he communicated incredibly well and that he helped to put the New Orleans Saints in a lot of really good positions over on the defensive side.
You think they're good there with Harris and Howden?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, look, they went after Justin Simmons, so maybe that tells people that, maybe they weren't super happy. I think that their pursuit of Justin Simmons had more to do with the fact that Justin Simmons was available than anything else. It's hard to pass that up. But I think they were pretty comfortable with where they were in their safety room, and I think Sunday kind of gave you a little bit of a glimpse as to why.
Hey, look, you've covered the team for a while. Does I know Dennis Allen talked about the storm coming and how you have these contingencies, so it's not like it's anything new for this team to deal with. But are you concerned at all about disruption of the week with the storm and all that stuff?
The only thing that I think would potentially end up costing them any type of issue would be how things are left come Thursday, right? With this storm expected to make landfall on Friday and then kind of move beyond the southern portion of Louisiana by the AM hours going into Thursday. The biggest thing is really going to be about how things are impacted on Thursday. And so if there's any issues at the team facility or anything like that, then they might have to relocate or something like that to figure out what they're going to do on Saturday, or potentially even head, they're close enough to where they could go to Dallas early if they needed to in a pinch, and things like that. So I think that there's enough contingency to where they'd be able to work around this. I appreciated Dennis Allen's sentiment the other day when he said that, they're the best team in the NFL at doing this because they're the ones that have to do this most often. So I think that they should be okay. But ideally this ends up being something to where, they move practice maybe a little bit earlier tomorrow, get everybody home to their families so that they can ride the storms out, and then come back on Thursday and be able to kind of pick up right where they left off without much of a hiccup.
Have you started to look ahead to the matchup against Dallas?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you look, if you had a thought right away, please go ahead.
Oh, no, I was thinking, I think one of the biggest things that you're looking for here is kind of like the coach matchup is really interesting. Dennis Allen's defense versus Mike McCarthy's offense, and then Mike Zimmer's defense up against his Clint Kubiak offense. I think that this game, unlike last week's game, is going to be a lot more of a chess match, a lot more forcing each other to adjust, and that could be something that's going to be big to watch from a matchup standpoint, where this matchup goes beyond just the players on the field. This kind of goes to the minds of the coaches on the sideline as well.
We got a ton of time between now and Sunday to break down the different angles of the matchup, but is there a position group where you think the Saints maybe have an advantage against Dallas?
Yeah, I think one of the places where they maybe have their biggest advantage in this one is going to be their linebacker play versus like the Saints defensive linebacker play up against the run game for Dallas. I was talking to my good friend Marcus Musher, who hosts the Locked on Cowboys podcast, and one of the things that he mentioned was, the Cowboys don't have as many weapons as they would like to have. They've got CeeDee Lamb, they've got Brandon Cooks, and then you have a less mobile Dak Prescott at this point in his career. But they need to figure out kind of who that third option is going to be on that team, with Jake Ferguson going down with an injury. And then to quote Marcus, with Ezekiel Elliott being 85 years old, it's tough to really be able to kind of find where that third option is going to come from. And so if the Saints linebacker core, their second level, is able to take away some of the short area passing game and take away the run game, it becomes really, really tough for Dallas to figure out who that third option is. And then you have that really tough matchup. Well, I would call it really a hotly contested matchup. It will be between the Saints secondary and those Dallas Cowboys wide receivers, where if that breaks even in any way, it becomes really challenging for Dallas to find that third option if the second level is playing well.
This is going to be a really interesting measuring stick for New Orleans after Sunday to go on the road to Dallas, especially with what they just did in Cleveland. Hey, last thing, I saw Kalechi Hudson today was signed off the practice squad by Cleveland. Any idea of how the Saints are going to replace him on the practice squad?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you're watching for is the health of the linebacker position when it comes to the active roster, and then that might alleviate them having to really fill that role over on the practice squad. They were without both rookie Jalen Ford and then without 2022 draft pick DeMarco Jackson, who has been a huge contributor to them over on special teams. If either one of those guys makes it back this week, particularly DeMarco Jackson, who has a lot more experience in the field, of course, having been in the league for a couple of years, it kind of alleviates your need to really immediately address that. So this could be perfect timing in an otherwise imperfect situation for New Orleans.
He's Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter or X. And, of course, you can read his stuff over at LouisianaSports.net, LouisianaSports.net. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Saints podcast. If you're not, that's at your favorite podcast app or YouTube. Go to Locked On Saints. Always appreciate it, man. Stay safe down there in NOLA. We'll talk soon, all right?
Thank you, buddy. Right back at you. Take care. Stay safe. Talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.